caught up in all the hype. And if Tupac came back from the dead now to hear this interview, he would agree. They got caught up.
Me and Pac went in the studio and did a song together. And then them little dudes.
Outlaws.
Yeah.
Outlaws.
They came, like, as soon as we got there, they came up to Pac talking about, yo, Lauryn Hill dissed you, Mobb Deep dissed you, this and that, and that.
KRS-One is shutting down the myths about Big Daddy Kane and Tupac's relationship, and what he revealed flips the whole story on its head. For years, people thought Kane and Pac had beef, but according to KRS, that couldn't be further from the truth. These two actually respected each other, and the so-called tension, it was nothing but smoke and mirrors created by the industry, and who was behind that smoke? None other than Suge Knight. Everyone knows Suge lived for drama. He pushed narratives, controlled artists, and made sure every move was about money and headlines. He thrived on chaos, especially when it came to that East Coast versus West Coast war. The more division he stirred up, the more records, magazines, and interviews got sold. Suge didn't just feed the fire, he practically poured gasoline on it. But here's the twist.
See what I'm saying? It's just that he's not one of those lyrical MCs that spit stuff, but his stuff is, he spit deep lyrics.
Big Daddy Kane never played into that circus. He wasn't interested in fake beefs or publicity wars. Meanwhile, Tupac didn't even have a choice. Pac got pulled into the madness whether he wanted to or not, and KRS-One made it clear. If there was any friction between Kane and Pac, it wasn't real. It was pure manipulation. And get this, Kane was even approached by Death Row to join the roster, but he turned it down. That one decision alone dragged him into a storyline he never asked for, making him look like he was against Pac just because he wouldn't sign with Suge. Wild, right? Behind closed doors, though, it was a whole different story. Kane and Pac had private convos, unrecorded sessions, and plans nobody ever got to hear about.
I understand they got caught up in all the hype. And if Tupac came back from the dead now to hear this interview, he would agree. They got caught up in the hype. And Public Enemy prophesized, don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. You know, and they got caught up. Biggie, they all got caught up, and it's a shame because we ain't supposed to go out like that.
Imagine the tracks that could have come out if the industry hadn't been so obsessed with pushing fake narratives. KRS-One is basically telling us, don't believe the hype. The respect between Kane and Pac was always real. So let's rewind to the mid-90s when Suge Knight was plotting his next big move, Death Row East. This wasn't just some side hustle, it was a power play to dominate the East Coast market. And who better to carry the flag than Brooklyn's own lyrical beast, Big Daddy Kane? Suge came at him with a wild offer, an advance of $100,000 and a shiny new deal that could have flipped Kane's career into a whole new tax bracket. On paper, it looked like a dream, but Kane wasn't fooled for a second. Kane himself later confirmed the deal was real, but he wanted no part of it. He flat out rejected Suge's offer, making it clear he wasn't about to play into the industry's dirty game. And that decision, it turned Kane into one of the rare neutral figures in the middle of the East versus West madness. While rappers were picking sides like it was a war zone, Kane stayed in his own lane. And you gotta respect his instincts because Kane already smelled the setup. Who just hands out that kind of money with no strings attached? Nobody. He knew Suge was trying to wrap him up in a contract with chains instead of opportunities. That's the devil's deal, Kane basically said without saying it. And the craziest part? Turning down that money was also Kane's way of refusing to get dragged into a fake rivalry with Tupac.
Right? You know, you being a respected lyricist, how you feel about the people that push the narrative and say that Tupac, he wasn't a lyricist?
Okay, but hold up. Tupac is a lyricist. See what I'm saying? It's just that he's not one of those lyrical MCs that spit stuff, but his stuff is, he spit deep lyrics that touch your soul.
See, Suge's blueprint was clear. He wanted to pit Kane against Pac, make it look like Brooklyn versus West Coast, keep the drama cooking, and cash in. But Kane wasn't buying it. According to KRS-One, Kane and Pac actually respected each other way more than people ever realized. They had common ground, mutual understanding, and Kane never carried hate in his heart for Pac. Sadly, though, Pac didn't have the same freedom. He got pulled deep into the whirlwind of East Coast versus West Coast chaos until it swallowed him whole. Now here's where things get even deeper, because Kane wasn't just another rapper watching Pac blow up. He actually recognized Tupac's raw talent from day one. While critics tried to clown Pac, saying he wasn't a real lyricist, Kane always stepped in to defend him. He made it clear Pac's pen was sharp and his voice carried weight. And here's a gem a lot of people don't know. There's an unreleased collab track floating around in history called Wherever You Are. Kane and Pac recorded it, but it never got an official release. To this day, hip-hop heads who've heard it say Pac absolutely held his own trading bars with a legend like Big Daddy Kane. Think about that. Pac standing toe-to-toe with one of Brooklyn's finest, proving every critic dead wrong. That track alone is living proof that Pac wasn't just passion and delivery, he had lyrical fire too.
This place, this institution can never side with, come under, understand the exploitation of our culture. Never will you ever see me standing in the environment where our culture is being exploited. Or if you do see me there.
But it doesn't stop there. Kane and Pac shared more than music. They both connected through the teachings of the 5% Nation, also known as the Nation of Gods and Earths. This wasn't just a casual interest, it shaped how they thought, how they lived, and how they rapped. The movement, born in Harlem in the 1960s, taught that black people are the original people of the world and that true power comes from knowing yourself. Heavy knowledge, deep self-awareness, and empowerment. That's what the 5% Nation was about, and both Kane and Pac embraced it. Kane had been studying the teachings since the 80s, and if you listen close, you'll catch it in his rhymes, references to supreme mathematics and the supreme alphabet laced into his bars. That's why his lines hit with a different kind of sharpness, a weight that only comes when the message runs deeper than just words. Even on tracks like The Wrath of Kane, you can hear it, that blend of street power and spiritual knowledge that made Kane stand apart.
You can't say it's an East Coast, West Coast rivalry, number one. People were starting to say it's an East Coast, West Coast rivalry because it was people that's trying to make money. It was true people trying to make careers. It was people trying to get famous. It was people hustling other people out of money on the East Coast. You don't have no team, you need us. We from the East Coast, pay us X amount of dollars for protection. And some of these idiots was doing it. For us, how we looked at it is, we looked at it as we representing the West Coast, but we represent the ghetto.
Now let's break down Tupac's side of the 5% Nation connection, because his journey with it was a little different from Kane's. Pac was never formally initiated, but he soaked up the teachings early on while living in Baltimore. And let's not forget, his mother, Afeni Shakur, was a proud former Black Panther. That revolutionary spirit was in his blood from day one. Through her, Pac grew up hearing about self-knowledge, fighting oppression, and using your voice as a weapon. And you can see those ideas stamped all over his music, his interviews, and even the way he carried himself. So, while Kane was dropping 5% Nation knowledge through coded rhymes, Pac was living and breathing that same energy through raw revolutionary fire. And that's what makes their connection so powerful. Two rappers on opposite coasts, with the industry trying to pit them against each other. But in reality, they were speaking the same language. Their shared philosophy created a mutual respect that cut through the noise, even while the media painted them as rivals. But here's where it gets messy. Suge Knight wasn't just running a record label, he was a master puppeteer, controlling narratives like a street-level politician. Death Row was booming, and Suge knew the formula. Nothing sold records faster than drama.
So I do consider Tupac a lyricist. You know what I'm saying? Even though his stuff is about substance, I do consider him a lyricist, because it's like this here. You have to be lyrical to touch someone's soul, to make someone feel like, yo, I don't know this man, but he knows my pain. You see what I'm saying? So I do consider Tupac a lyricist.
The East versus West beef became the perfect marketing campaign, and he leaned all the way in. His play with Kane was slick but deadly. By offering Kane that Death Row East deal, Suge was trying to pull a respected East Coast legend into his West Coast empire. Imagine the headlines if Kane signed. Pac's supposed enemy now standing with Death Row. That's the story Suge wanted the world to eat up. But Kane's refusal didn't just save his own name, it turned him into a wild card. Once Kane turned down Death Row, the media wasted no time flipping the script. Suddenly, Kane wasn't just an artist, he was that guy who refused to pick a side while the whole rap world was being forced into battle lines. And the wild part, even neutrality started looking like rebellion. Suge had that kind of power. He could twist silence into a statement, making Kane's refusal to play along seem like a shot in itself. But Tupac, he never had that kind of freedom. Once he inked his deal with Death Row, Pac was officially the face of Suge's empire. He became the flagship artist, and the East Coast versus West Coast war wasn't just hype anymore. It was stitched into his brand. Every magazine cover, every TV special, every radio show, they didn't just report on it, they fed the beast.
The next moment, this thing's gonna fall. I'm there to bring this shit down. If you see me in a situation like that, you should say, yo, watch out. Something's about to happen. Turn your cameras on. Something's about to go down. Why is Chris here? Why is he here? Something's about to, he gonna say some shit right now that is gonna,
And while Pac was naturally fiery and outspoken, a lot of those so-called beefs were being fueled, edited, and sometimes straight up manufactured by industry hands. KRS-One saw through the smoke and refused to play their games. He kept calling out how the machine was using black artists like pawns, feeding them to the wolves for profit. But let's be real, Suge wasn't the only mastermind pulling strings. The whole industry was in on it. Record execs, A and R reps, even the media. Everybody was cashing checks off the rivalry. Album sales spiked, magazines flew off shelves, TV ratings skyrocketed, all because they kept spinning the narrative of conflict. And in some cases, it was even dirtier than that. Artists were pressured to diss each other, or interviews got chopped up so it sounded like they were throwing shade when they really weren't. A look became a headline. A single quote became a diss track. And just like that, the machine turned brothers into enemies, sometimes without them even knowing it. And here's where things hit a whole new level of shady.
It's a problem with Death Row and Suge Knight and Snoop and Tupac against me. It's a war. That's the most craziest thing I ever heard of in my life. I get no strikes for slapping a female. I don't hit women. Or I don't pray on the weak. So how I'm a war with a guy who ain't no man? I don't have nothing against nobody out there who doing their thing. You doing your thing, you do it. But don't do an interview and say, well, the biggest war is between Death Row and my company. Death Row on a whole nother level. If they had a problem with us, we don't have a problem with nobody. Everybody know where we at 24/7. Either at the studio or at the office. If there's an event going on, we're gonna be the first ones in the front row having fun. At the Super Bowl, we're gonna be there betting and cheering. So we're not the one hiding. There's a lot of people who make up like stories to try to get themselves famous. Like get themselves some yellow power. That's the wrong way to do it. If you're gonna do it right. If you're gonna be with Death Row, I want to do it.
While Kane managed to keep himself clean from the drama, Pac was drowning in it. Every move he made, every word out of his mouth got dissected and turned into headlines. If he laughed with someone from the East Coast, the media spun it as betrayal. If he got into an argument, suddenly it was war. Pac couldn't win because the system wanted him trapped in the role of the outlaw. Behind the scenes, industry insiders knew exactly what they were doing. Stirring up beef meant one thing: money. Album sales for Death Row shot through the roof when Pac dropped tracks laced with fiery shots. Magazines like The Source and Vibe sold record-breaking issues when they put Pac's face on the cover with a rival's name in bold letters. The tension wasn't just real life, it was marketing. And here's the part most people don't talk about. Pac wasn't just carrying his own battles, he was carrying Death Row's reputation too. Suge wanted him as the face of West Coast dominance, which meant Pac had to be louder, bolder, and more aggressive than anyone else. That pressure built up, and Pac, who was already emotional and outspoken, became the perfect storm. Every diss track he dropped, every interview where he exploded, only made the feud feel bigger than life. Meanwhile, Kane stood on the sidelines with respect intact, almost like the ghost in the story. He was there, he was relevant, but he refused to play the puppet.
We tried to sign you to Death Row East at one point?
Yeah.
What happened with that?
He called and said, Suge trying to, build a Death Row East, man. I think it might be a good look for you. So I went out there, and like when I walked in, these two big-ass Rockwilders came, and then Suge, he comes out the back. They come running around, sniffing around me and stuff, sits down with his cigar, sits his cigar down and does this. And both the dogs ran and sat down next to him. So I'm like, okay, this one of them meetings.
That contrast between Pac getting swallowed by the industry machine and Kane refusing to sell out shows exactly why KRS-One kept stressing their real relationship. Pac's breaking point came fast, and the whole world watched it play out in real time. By the time All Eyes on Me dropped, he wasn't just an artist. He was a soldier in a war he never truly asked for. The media painted him as the loudest voice of the West Coast. And once that label stuck, Pac had no way out. He was too deep in it. Every diss, every headline, every staged East versus West clash made him look like the ultimate aggressor. And let's be real, Pac's natural fire only fueled it. He was passionate, emotional, and brutally honest in interviews. That honesty got twisted into drama. Executives knew it, Suga knew it, and the magazines knew it. Pac's pain, his anger, his raw words, they turned it all into entertainment. What should have been art and expression got sold as a spectacle, and Pac became the poster child for a rivalry that was half manufactured and half survival. Meanwhile, Kane stood firm in his position.
He said, well, what you want? A $400,000 advance. Why you ain't just simply say $500,000? Man, you Big Daddy Kane, man. I can't see myself signing you for less than $1 million. I gotta give you $1 million. You're already a household name. But then he was like, well, yo, look, I don't know how you doing financially, but if you want, I can just give you $100K in the morning. That's when I knew it was time to go. I was like, you just gonna give me $100,000 with no agreement? Nah, I was like, I'll let you know tomorrow. And then I went and switched my flight to like a 6 a.m. joint.
By refusing Suge's Death Row East deal, he had unknowingly dodged the biggest bullet of his career. He kept his name clean, his respect intact, and avoided becoming another pawn in the industry's chess game. But the flip side, that made Kane an outsider, and outsiders don't sell headlines. So while Pac's face was everywhere, Kane's story went underground, remembered only by those who knew the truth. According to KRS-One, that's exactly why he kept defending both men, because the real narrative was buried under the hype. The truth was that Kane and Pac had common ground, but the machine couldn't profit off of peace. Kane and Tupac were the perfect examples of how the industry plays dirty. Both men were respected lyricists, both carried powerful personal philosophies, and when they actually crossed paths, it was nothing but respect. But you'd never know that if you only followed the headlines. The industry flipped their story inside out, painting them as rivals because conflict sold better than truth. Suge Knight and his allies knew exactly what they were doing. Fans loved drama, and they were happy to stage manage every piece of it like it was a scripted TV show. And don't get it twisted, this wasn't just Suge's game. Labels on the East Coast, especially Bad Boy, leaned into the same tactics. Executives on both sides of the map were quietly fanning the flames because the more divided the culture became, the more people bought records to support their side. But Suga, he had the biggest spotlight and the most ruthless strategy. He used intimidation, loyalty tests, and raw street credibility as weapons to control his artists and keep the narrative on his terms. Pac, with his explosive energy and unfiltered honesty, became the perfect weapon for this kind of manipulation. Every time he spoke, the media had fuel, and Suga had a headline. His passion was turned against him, turning real emotions into staged battles for profit.
Those things, it just got out of control. Dudes was getting killed, and I felt responsible. But I couldn't stop it.
We ain't mad at the whole spot in New York, we just mad at certain people. I got this new project coming out along with some other brothers called One Nation, and it's like an East Coast, West Coast collaboration to kill this whole new vibe everybody want to be on about it being a war between the East Coast and the West Coast. Right. It's really just a problem with two rappers. And the East Coast, West Coast thing is something that the journalists and people are making up just to get paid off it so it can drag out and everybody can have albums. They're perpetuating it so it can be drama. When it all go down, don't look at me and Biggie and be like, why is there a big East Coast, West Coast war when you're shooting this to 300 homes, 300 countries, telling them about an East Coast, West Coast war that they would never know exists. So that's where information becomes a problem. We both need to exercise greater.
Kane, on the other hand, was way too sharp to fall into that trap. He refused to be a pawn, but even that choice got twisted into a new angle. Neutrality became shade, and silence was treated like a statement. And while fans obsessed over the fake beef, the real money was moving quietly in the background. Executives were cutting deals, stacking contracts, taking percentages off collabs, and pushing albums while the public fought over coastal loyalty. The East versus West feud wasn't just about music. It was about selling attention, hype, and cultural control. Suge and his industry rivals understood one thing crystal clear: controlling perception was just as valuable, if not more, than controlling record sales. And this right here is why the story of Big Daddy Kane and Tupac hits so hard. It's proof that the history we get fed about hip-hop isn't always the truth. It's the version the industry wanted us to see. Suge Knight and those executives pulling strings behind the curtain weren't just letting the chaos happen, they profited off it. The artists, they were stuck in the middle, carrying the weight of a war they never asked to fight. Think about it. The so-called East Coast versus West Coast war wasn't really about two coasts or two crews. It was a carefully staged production with Suge as one of the main directors, shaping the script, casting the roles, and making sure the conflict kept the spotlight hot. Every magazine cover, every interview, every diss track fed into a narrative that was as much business as it was beef. And here's the sad part. Tupac didn't fit neatly into that script. He wasn't built to be anyone's puppet, but the machine forced him into that role until it consumed him. Meanwhile, Kane's refusal to play along meant their real bond, the mutual respect and shared philosophy, got buried under fake headlines and industry hype. That's why their connection rarely gets talked about. It didn't sell chaos, so it didn't make money. So now I gotta ask, what do you think about this? Was Kane and Pac's true relationship overshadowed on purpose? Do you believe Suge and the other puppet masters manufactured one of the biggest rivalries in hip-hop history just to keep profits flowing? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around to see what's really going down in our hood next.